Thank you to Joseph Pesky, who read our scripture out of John. Yes, we're taking a detour for a couple of weeks during Lent out of Mark into the book of John, thanks to the lectionary. And he read John chapter 2, verses 13 to 22. Thanks, Joseph. Our sermon title is Missing Out. Do you think Jesus danced at the wedding at Cana? Think about it. A couple of Christmases ago, the Morgans gave me a dancing Jesus. Yeah, a dancing Jesus. So, a little sacrilegious maybe? I don't know. Does this make you uncomfortable to think that Jesus could dance? Of course, making a dancing Jesus, I don't know. But think about it. Do you think Jesus danced? Does that kind of make you uncomfortable? Are you a little bit embarrassed about it? You know, I mean, think about the weddings you've been to, and maybe you've been too embarrassed to dance, or even worse, you've got like that uncle who thinks he's like really cool or whatever, and he gets up and he dances, and that's totally embarrassing. And you're just going, yeah, I'm not related to him. Yeah, dancing Jesus, a little bit uncomfortable. But maybe what's even more uncomfortable is that very next passage after the wedding at Cana in the book of John, is where Jesus goes into the temple during Passover. Now it's at the end of, it's during Holy Week that we look at the cleansing of the temple in the other Gospels, but in John puts it right after the story of the wedding at Cana. And he goes into the temple during Passover, and he comes in and he sees these people who are selling all sorts of things, because, you know, people come at Passover to the temple and at other times as well. And whenever they come to the temple, they want to make sacrifices. And the reality is that a lot of them have traveled a long way, or even if they haven't traveled a long way, they need to have a particular kind of animal. It has to be pure and unblemished and all of this kind of stuff. And so for people's convenience, or in order to make sure that the sacrifices are exactly the kind that they need to have, they're selling the animals, all different kinds of animals, for sacrifices right there at the temple. Not only that, but people are coming from all different places in the Roman Empire, and they have all different kinds of coinage, and they need to have the particular kind of money that works in the temple. And so people come and they make exchanges of money so that they can have the money for the temple in order to buy the sacrifices, the animals for the sacrifices, and then pay whatever fees that they need to pay in the temple, and they have to pay it with that particular coinage. So, of course, they have to have money exchanged. And in all of these exchanges, there's a little bit of profit going on here and a little bit of profit going on there. And Jesus comes in and he sees this whole thing, this whole enterprise going on in the temple, and he gets really angry. You think dancing Jesus can be a little bit embarrassing. What about angry Jesus? Jesus comes in and it says that he made whips out of some cords, and he shoos all of the animals. He disperses all of the animals out of that area. I mean, talk about confusion. And then beyond that, he comes over, and to where they're changing money, he tips over the tables. He overturns the tables, and you can imagine coins and money going everywhere. And then he goes over to where the doves and the birds are kept, those smaller sacrifices, the sacrifices that are for people who are not very rich. And he goes, Get these things out of here. What do you think this is? Walmart? What do you think this is? A mall? He's saying, what are you doing making my Father's house a marketplace? Can you imagine the commotion? I mean, we think about the embarrassment or the discomfort that it gives us when we think about Jesus maybe would dance at a wedding. But how uncomfortable do we get at this Jesus, this angry Jesus, this Jesus that goes in and creates an incredible commotion? Can you imagine being his disciples? Can you imagine? Jesus is really angry. This is the most violent we see Jesus get in any of the Gospels. Does it make us uncomfortable? And are we uncomfortable with the thing that makes Jesus angry? You see, part of the issue here is that it is a commercial enterprise that is happening there in the temple. People come to the temple in order to make sacrifices, in order to connect with God in ways that they understand that the law tells them to. And there are different rules that they have to follow in order to do that. And in the law, you see, that people need to bring a certain kind of sheep or whatever for sacrifice. But for poor people, there's actually an exception. Okay, if you can't afford a sheep, then, or you don't have access to a sheep, then bring a dove or a bird of some sort, which would be much more accessible to a person who would be poor. Except now that there's this commercial enterprise where you can't bring your own. You have to buy it from the people in the temple in order for it to be exactly the right kind of sacrifice and all of that kind of thing. There is a commercial enterprise. Think about it. When you go to the movie theater, and you could go to McDonald's on your way in and get your Coke and bring your Coke with you to the movie theater. But no, they won't let you bring your McDonald's Coke into the movie theater. When you go to the movie theater, and it's hard to remember the last time we were able to go into the movie theater, but you go into the movie theater, and if you want a Coke, you have to buy their Coke. And their Coke costs at least twice, if not 3 times the amount of the Coke that you could get at, Burger King. Got to be fair, McDonald's, Burger King. But they won't let you in with your own Coke. You have to buy your Coke from them, and it costs so much more. And that's a little bit annoying, right? Some of us try and sneak things in. Maybe not me, but other people sneak things into the movie theater so that you don't have to buy their concessions. But this is small potatoes. Whether or not you can buy a Coke in the movie theater or you can bring your own in when it comes to this. The commercial enterprise is exploitive because they're making money off of people who are coming in to do the things that they need to do to be right with God. They're spiritual practices, and they are inhibited by the cost, by this commercial enterprise that is exploitive. It's preventing people from having access to their experience of worship with God. It's not just the economic part of it, but where they have set up. In the temple, there are different levels of access to God. There's the Holy of Holies, which is in the depth of the temple, and only one priest at designated times can go into the Holy of Holies. And then there's a section where only priests can go. And then there is a section where only Jewish men can go. And then there's a section where Jewish women can go but that's as far as they can go. And then the section outside of that is the court of the Gentiles, where people who are not Jewish, who have not converted, officially converted to Judaism, that's as far as they can go. The God worshipers who come from all over the Mediterranean world because they believe in this Hebrew God and they want to worship this God, but that's as far as they can go into the temple. That structure is difficult enough. It's exclusionary enough. But then they set up the marketplace, the commercial enterprise, in the court of the Gentiles. So this chaos is going on in the place, the only place where God-fearers who are not Jews can come to worship. And so access is prevented to the people of the world. See, the temple is supposed to be this place that's set on the hill. It's a place where people from the nations can look and see the glory of God. And yet this place is becoming an exclusive, exploitive, commercial enterprise. And the worst part about it is that it's systemic. The worst part about it is that the whole enterprise has become dependent on the sales and the money exchange. And so, if you take that away, the whole system would fall apart. And all of this is a distraction. It takes people away from being able to see God's presence and the glory of God. In that time, in that place, under those circumstances, there are a lot of people who are missing out. Either because they have a hard time being able to pay the prices that are necessary in order to do the things that they feel, according to the law, that they need to do to be close to God. And then just the physical presence, the distraction, the noise, the commotion that prevents people from the nations to be able to worship God. People are missing out. And Jesus is angry. Now, John is telling his audience this story. And he's putting, as he tells the story, he also brings up the conversation that happens. The people get, of course, very upset that Jesus has come in and he's done this. He's created this incredible commotion, and the temple authorities come to him and say, "Who gives you the authority to do such a thing as this? Show us a sign that you have such authority." And Jesus says, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it up. I will rebuild it in 3 days." Now, of course, they hear that and they go, "This is crazy. This temple has been built up, is being built up for years and years and years. Yes, it's been destroyed and it's taken years, decades to rebuild this temple. How do you think that you could, first of all, destroy it and then rebuild it in 3 days?" And John says, but Jesus was talking about his own body. He was talking about dying and being raised again. And in John's time, as he tells this, the people understand that Jesus would later go on to be killed on the cross and that he would rise again. What John is telling his audience is that with the coming of Jesus, things are different now. Jesus' body is the temple, and the temple system is obsolete. We can see this hinted at in the wedding at Cana, when the water is turned into wine, the water that is in these jars that are used for purification according to the law, and that water is changed into fine wine that is used to celebrate this wedding. Something is changing. Something is different. And the law, the purpose of the law, is coming to some kind of fulfillment. We see it in the next chapter when Jesus talks with Nicodemus. And Nicodemus, the Pharisee, the one who is interested in following the law to the letter, and he comes in to Jesus at night, and they talk about these things, these spiritual things, and Jesus talks about that you must be born again, and talks about how the wind blows where it will, and you don't know where it comes from, and you don't know where it's going. And that is what the Spirit of God is doing. It sounds very different than all of the particulars of following the law and doing the things of the temple. And then there's the woman at the well, and it becomes absolutely clear in their conversation when they're talking about the proper place to worship, because this is something between Jews and Samaritans. The Samaritans say that the place to worship is on the mountain, and the Jews say that the place to worship is in the temple in Jerusalem. And Jesus says to her, a time is coming. In fact, it's already come when we will neither worship in the temple or on the mountain. But the one who worships God in spirit and in truth. Something is changing. Things are different. And in fact, John picks up on this theme that we can see the glory of God all over the place. And in fact, what God wants of us is not worship in a particular place, but worship in all that we are. That God is accessible to us through Jesus Christ anywhere we go. John talks about abiding with God. We are invited to abide with God as we abide with Christ. It's a whole different picture of access to God. And for that audience of John who are hearing these words or reading these words in the year 90 or 100, 20 years after the destruction of the temple, they're still troubled by the fact that this temple has been destroyed. And for a lot of reasons, we would be disturbed by that. But part of it is that that's where God lives. But in fact, John is pointing out to them that because of Jesus, God lives. We can abide with God. We have access to God without going to a particular place. We have access. For John, Alicia Myers writes, when people focus too much on a physical location, they miss out on God's glory, which is standing right in front of them. As John tells this story, he wants his audience to realize that when Jesus says, destroy this temple and I will raise it up in 3 days, that we're talking about a new temple. That we're talking about in Jesus, we have access to God. But people are missing out. These religious authorities are looking at the incarnation of God and asking what authority he has to overturn tables in the temple. People are missing out. So 1 year after COVID chased us out of our church building, and soon we may find ourselves being able to use our building again and finding the wonderful experience again of being able to worship, being in the same room, hearing each other, being able to meet together in person. And as much as we miss our building, I think the reality is that we just miss each other and being physically present with one another. We need to ask the question, how are we missing out? Yes, we have missed out. We have missed out on a lot of things this last year, not being able to be physically present with one another and not being able to be in our church building. In a way, our church building has become a place where we store our stuff. But not just that, it continues to be a place in the community where people look and they say, oh, look, there's the Baptist church. It's a symbol of what God has been doing in our community for over 130 years through the First Baptist Church of Redlands. And those are all really good things. But in this year where we've had to do without our building, what have we realized? What have we learned about access to God? We've learned a lot of things, I think, about access to God. What ways have we found access to God in our own lives, even though we can't come together and have worship together in the same place, in the same room? What have we learned? I hope we've learned that God is present. That God is present, whether it's in our homes or the places that we've gone, the times that we've had to worship, knowing that we are worshiping in our place and other people that we love, that are part of our church family, are worshiping in another place. I hope we've found a new understanding of access. Who has gained access because we've been chased out of our building for the last year by COVID? I've heard from people who've said, I couldn't have been I have missed so many times the worship experience, and now I get to experience because it's online. Now I know online is not a perfect substitute for being in person, but there are some people that under normal circumstances wouldn't be able to be together with us. And now they are experiencing some sense of fellowship and some connection in worship with the First Baptist Church family because we've had to go online and we've figured out how to go online. There are people connecting with God and with each other because of Zoom. They're a part of Bible studies that maybe they've never been a part of when we were meeting in person, but now they're connecting with each other in Bible study. And we've had times throughout the year of learning more about God as we study together using Zoom. It's not perfect. It's not the same as being in the same room with each other, but more people have had access. We've been able to include people in all different ways, no matter where they live during this time. We've learned a few things about access. And yes, we feel like we've been missing out over the last year, but in fact, we've discovered new ways to see God at work outside of the building and outside of the traditional activities that we have done. In retrospect, we need to ask the question, how has our building, how has our former practices and maybe even traditions prevented people from seeing and experiencing God's glory? Have we been a place where some people maybe don't feel welcome? We need to ask ourselves the question, especially as we anticipate being able to use our building again. Who's been missing out? And is there something that we can do as we come back together again physically in the next few months in various ways? Have we learned anything about access to God that can enhance our life together as a church family, that can enhance our mission and our ministry into the community and into the world? Has this time, as we've been calling it, this time in the wilderness, have we learned anything about where we see God? I hope so. What can we do to provide more opportunity for people to experience God, to know Jesus, than ever before? Jesus died and rose again so that people can know the power of God in their lives. How can we as a church make sure that people aren't missing out? Think about it.